Welcome back, everybody. This is week 4, day 2. We're going to be talking about advocacy and confidentiality, heavy on the confidentiality, as that is one of our most important functions as paraeducators. You know my name, you know the game. Let's get going. Okay. I have posted a link to an article called 9 Ways Facebook Can Get You Fired. I would note that the article is from the UK. It's written in British English, but nevertheless, the things described there will get you just as fired in the US as they do in the UK, Australia, Canada, etc. Something to take a look at. All right, so that's just a fun article with some colorful language in it that can help you to avoid getting in trouble for using social media at work. Okay, folks, and then if you're looking in the week 4 module on Canvas, we have the first DLC for this week. It's all about confidentiality. It's a little brochure that I have made for you. Please take a look at that as a supplemental reading for this week. All right, folks. So part of this week is about, part of today's lecture is about advocacy. Part of today's lecture is about confidentiality. Let's talk a little bit about advocacy. When we advocate for people, we speak in support of them, speak or act in support of them. Talking first about advocacy for students with disabilities. Note, I did not say disabled students, but students with disabilities. As an employee of the school and as an ethical person, the paraeducator should see themselves as an advocate for the rights of all students and their parents. You know, because of the advocacy efforts of parents and professionals, all children have the right to receive an appropriate education. That didn't happen by itself. You know, being fair is very expensive. So it was cheaper for the government to be unfair. And now we're behaving more fairly. These rights have been established through both court decisions and state and federal legislation. Okay, let's talk about IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is a piece of federal legislation. It was updated in 2004. This legislation outlines a whole bunch of rights, including these ones. The right to a free, appropriate public education for all children. This is the most fundamental thing from this piece of legislation. The right to placement in the least restrictive educational environment. We will return to this term several times over the course of this class. But basically it means, you know, students have the right to be educated in general education classrooms. We also get the right to fairness in the assessment and placement process. Historically, and possibly even today, placement exams have been used to discriminate against people for a number of reasons, not just because of disabilities. IDEA also provides for the right to an individualized educational program. This is where we get IEPs from. This is the institutional support for them. Also, the right for parents to be informed and participate in the educational process. And the right and procedures for parents to disagree with school decisions. We'll talk about each of these things. We will reinstantiate all of them in various ways throughout the rest of our conversation. At the beginning of this slideshow, I gave sort of my definition of advocacy. The term has been defined in a variety of ways by many different individuals and groups, just like communication, right? Here's one of the best ones. Pure advocacy refers to action taken on behalf of someone else to ensure some right, secure some benefit, or enhance the advocate's well-being. All right, so we haven't come up with a better one since 1978. Let's keep talking about advocating for students with disabilities. A number of different types of advocacy have been developed through the years. It's generally held, you know, there is general consensus on the idea that the ideal for each person is to be able to self-advocate and handle most life situations as independently as possible. Does it sound familiar? It kind of sounds like the goal of all education. We want to be able to empower each student with the tools they need to build their own future success. People with special needs, which you might call exceptionalities, however, may benefit from assistance as they try to maximize their lives. This kind of help might be provided through other people or groups who may act as advocates and speak out on the student's behalf. The importance here is that paraeducators are in maybe the best position to be able to recognize the needs of their students and to, offer help in referring them to helpful resources at the school. So one of our jobs is to connect the students with resources that they need in the classroom and outside of the classroom at our agency. Okay, let's come back to this activity at a later time. Right now, I want to move ahead to confidentiality, accessing confidential records. All right, recording once again. Let's talk about some different kinds of confidential records. Under today's laws, parents must have the opportunity to inspect and review all educational records concerning the identification, evaluation, placement, and provision of educational services for their child. This language is taken direct, so it may not be the most accessible language, but basically we have to provide parents with opportunities to do all of these things. Before IDEA came into law, it wasn't necessarily so. The school has to let parents inspect and review any educational record relating to their child that the school has collected, maintained, or used. And the school has to comply with a request for these records within 45 days and before any meeting relating to identification, evaluation, or placement of the child occurs. Moving on with our discussion of types of confidential records, the right to inspect and review education records under this section includes the following things. The right to a response from the school to reasonable requests for explanations and interpretations of the records. The parents can ask the school why. The right to request that the school provide copies of the records containing the information if failure to provide those copies would effectively prevent the parent from exercising the right to inspect and review the records. Ugh, lots of words. Okay. The school has to provide us with records. Parents also have the right to have a representative for themselves inspect and review the records. So it's not just, here's the record. I hope that you can interpret everything here. There's often an intermediary involved. And the language we're using here kind of makes it sound like a very sort of confrontational or hostile situation. But really, it's just designed to address such a situation if it were to come up. Usually the school is happy to provide records to parents. But once legal questions start coming up, it may turn into a situation where everything needs to be documented, meetings need to be set up, and all that kind of thing. Lots more words here. Basically what we're saying here is, unless the school has been told by some outside agency, police, lawyers, that a parent doesn't have the right to read their students' records, we can assume the parent does have the right to read the students' records. Okay. So here's how we're saying it in legalese. A school may presume, guess or assume that the parent has authority to inspect and review records relating to his or her child unless the agency has been advised that the parent does not have the authority under applicable state law governing such matters as guardianship, separation, and divorce. All right. So what does this mean? Directory information. Phone number of the classroom where the student is having class, this kind of thing. Schools are allowed to disclose directory information, but only if the parents have been notified and given an adequate amount of time to request the information be withheld. Okay. for some reason, the dentist's office needs to contact the school and let them know that the child's dentist appointment has been canceled. They're not allowed to just call up and say, we need to let Janie know that her dental appointment has been canceled. Which classroom is she in? Right. They can't do that. All educational records are confidential. They're destroyed upon graduation or after a 3-year continuous absence, unless they're part of the special education program. In this case, they're still destroyed after 5 years after the completion of services for which special education funds were used. Okay, so it's a 3-5 rule. But most of the time, what happens is the records are simply destroyed upon the student's graduation. Okay, so here's a handy dandy breakdown of what types of things classify as what. So you can see on this chart, most things fall under directory information like name, birthday, address, telephone number. Degrees, awards, honors received, those are more or less public information. Record of dates of attendance and grade level completed. So, often another educational institution like a college may request verification of a high schooler's attendance, things like that. Grade level completed. Now, things that are confidential include transcripts of classes taken with the grades and the units and everything. Social security number, of course, that one's super confidential. No confidentiality quiz. I gotcha there. Let's talk some more about directory information. Schools are allowed to disclose directory information, but only if the parents have been notified, remember? All right.